Number 1. So this happened a long time ago when I was a kid. If you didn't know, Russia is filled with apartment houses and we don't really have much space or privacy because there might be a bunch of neighbors living at the same floor with you, so everyone knows everyone. We had 2 entrance doors. One was made of metal and the other behind the first one was made of wood. It was also a common thing for Russia in the early mid-2000s, despite the fact that they were not really safe. So basically my family and I lived in a cement box behind 2 thin doors. This happened at night as I got up to go to the toilet, which was near the entrance, but at first I had to go through the living room where my parents were sleeping. That is why I wasn't allowed to turn on the lights in order to not wake up my mom and dad, and my path was passing through the complete darkness, which I was afraid of in my childhood. When I got to the toilets, I saw a silhouette of a man standing at the end of a corridor near our entrance/exit. I just stood completely frozen looking at him, and I was sure that this person, whoever it was looking at me too. He was tall and wearing all black. I couldn't see anything but his eyes staring at me. He kept silent. I knew that this couldn't be any of our neighbors for sure, because I've never seen a person corresponding to his height. I took 1 step back, still looking at him, and then ran into the living room to wake up my dad. He didn't really believe me about a man standing in our hallway and doing literally nothing, but I insisted that he should go and make the person leave or call the police. My dad saw this man and said something along the lines of, "What the heck are you doing here?" Then went to him and then literally pushed him out of the apartment, although this man didn't really resist. My dad checked if the doors were locked and told me to go back to sleep. I still don't know what that was because this person didn't look like a regular burglar, at least because he wasn't doing anything. He just broke into someone's apartment and was just staring at their kid. Maybe if I didn't get up, he would have robbed our apartment and left. Who knows? Such situations like this are not really common in my country, especially when someone breaks into a flat full of people in the middle of the night. Something is off about this whole story, but I was completely awake. So was my dad, and we don't really want to know this person's intentions. Number 2. I live in a major metropolitan area in DC, and I try to practice keen situational awareness and stay aware of any present danger. To be honest, I've seen some pretty crazy things and am very paranoid. I am a petite woman who's looked around 16 for the past decade, and therefore I'm a pretty big target for creeps. Depending on what part of the city I'm going to or how late I plan to be out, I sometimes strap a fixed blade hunting knife to myself. I conceal it under my pants or boot in the winter, and in the summer I either strap it to my arm or around my waist, neither of which are very comfortable. It was raining that night. I was wearing an oversized retro windbreaker I had just found at the thrift store, and the knife was in my purse. The humid DC summer made my skin sticky, and the thought of having a sheath around my arm was very unappealing. I got onto the metro towards home, but the conductor announced that the train was going to go out of service on the stop before mine. One of my buddies lives 2 blocks away from that metro stop, so I decided to text him seeing if he wanted to stop by and smoke him up. He responded saying he would be on his balcony, and I could stop by and yell for him to let me into the building whenever. On the train, I usually listen to music, read, crochet, or stare out the window with regular intervals of casing the train for any sketchy crap. Once in a blue moon, people get robbed on the metro, and if I see packs of teens or people moving up and down the aisle without sitting down, I usually pack up my crap and tuck my bag underneath myself. It was right before the rush hour and the train was fairly full. I didn't sense anything unusual until I noticed a guy who looked sort of out of place sitting across the aisle facing me. DC has people from all over, and people rarely if ever stand out to me as looking conspicuous or unusual. But something about this guy triggered my spidey senses. This guy was skinny, had greasy dark hair, and looked sort of Eastern European. He was wearing a purple button-down and tight pants and kept talking on the phone while checking a second phone in his lap. I speak Russian, but I also know some Spanish and can get the gist of similar languages, and I could tell he was speaking Italian and describing a small female with brown hair and a jacket. He also kept saying sola multiple times, which really got my attention. Sola means alone in many languages. I got really anxious at that point, and my heart started pounding harder every single time he looked over at me. Best case scenario, he was just some slimy dude describing me to his friends. But life is too short to count on the best case scenario. I put my bag on my lap and discreetly strapped the knife to my arm underneath the baggy sleeve of my jacket, just in case. I texted my friend to see if he could meet me at his metro station so that I wouldn't have to walk by myself. However, the reception in the train was pretty bad, and I didn't notice that the text didn't go through. The train arrived at my stop, and I tried to wait until the very last second to get off so he couldn't follow me. The doors closed a second or two right behind me, but he was a skinny dude and managed to slip through them. I started picking up the pace and tried to get lost in the crowd on the way to pay my fare. Once I paid, I started booking it to my friend's place, but I didn't want to run too fast as to make myself more visible. I turned around and saw that no one was behind me, but I didn't want to relax until I was at my friend's apartment. There was a big burly guy who lived near my friend's building who would blast 80s jams and work out on his porch every evening. I prayed that he would be out there by the time I passed by his house so that maybe I could chill there for a second and call my friend. I walked by his house, but he wasn't there. I started to hear footsteps behind me, and I turned around. As I feared, it was Purple Shirt Guy gaining on me. I started running, and in my panic, I didn't notice that there was a car stopped in the middle of the road a few feet ahead of me, with the side door wide open. The guy caught up to me and lunged with his hands around my waist. He was surprisingly strong for such a thin guy. And one of what is probably the most crucial decisions of my life, I pulled the knife out and just stabbed wherever I could, flailing to get free. I heard fabric rip. The serrated knife had gotten caught on his shirt. I decided to use the leverage of him gripping onto me to actually aim this time. I then got the knife under his button down and just pushed it in as hard as I could. I had never been more aware of just how fundamentally defenseless I am than in that moment. I couldn't even scream or make a sound. It was like I had gone completely mute and had been holding my breath or something. I have no idea how deeply I cut him or how injured he was, and honestly I don't really care. He dropped me for a second and I ran across the street, almost getting hit by a passing car up to my friend's apartment. I noticed an empty police car sitting next to my friend's building and I got incredibly paranoid. At the time, and probably still, my instinct was that the police would care more about me having a knife on me than almost getting kidnapped. My friend buzzed me into his building, and I went inside, going straight into his bathroom without even saying hello. I washed my knife and the scrapes I had gotten in the struggle. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for some reason I decided not to tell my friend what had happened. I sat with him on his balcony and hung out and laughed as if nothing ever happened. I can't tell if it was shock or just being desensitized from the city, but to this day I occasionally have moments where I realize the gravity of what actually happened. I hope writing it out will help me wake up. To that psycho in the purple button down, I'm not sorry I stabbed you, and I hope I never meet you again. Number 3. So back when I was in high school, my dad left my mom and I, and went to live with his friend about an hour and a half from us. I was 15 years old when this happened, and now I'm 24, and neither of my parents will tell me why my dad left. Anyway, after my dad left, my mom lost her job because he took the only car, and we ended up living in a motel a couple towns over from the town we used to live in. Even though we lived in a different town, I still went to school in my old town. They would pick me up in a bus or van and bring me to and from school. A few months after living in the motel, I had made this friend in school named Randy. He was really cute and we got along really well. Near the middle of the school year, my dad had a warrant out for his arrest because he hadn't paid child support for either of my siblings in a long time because apparently he couldn't afford it or something like that. So obviously he ended up getting arrested. He spent 90 days in jail about a mile down the road from the motel my mom and I were staying in. And when he got out, he came and stayed with us again. Near the end of the school year, I was at one of my friend's houses when I got a call from my dad telling me we got an apartment in the town I go to school in. I was so excited and happy. A few months go by and things are going pretty smoothly. Randy and I decide we want to hang out outside of school for the first time. I didn't really hang out with anyone outside of school because if I ever missed the bus that would take me from school to the motel, then I would be stuck with no way home and nowhere to stay. Randy was pretty much my only friend at the time, so I thought, yeah, let's hang out. We decided we would drop off our stuff at my house and then go and do whatever until one of us eventually had to go home. So we start walking home from school and we get onto my street when Randy then says, "Hey, I used to live on this exact street a few months ago." I asked him which house he lived in and he gave me my house and apartment number. I thought it was pretty cool that he used to live in the house that I lived in now. Fast forward a few weeks. Randy and I would hang out pretty often and grew pretty close, but then he told me he wanted more and he wanted to go out with me. My boyfriend and I broke up a few weeks after I moved back to town and I was then pregnant with his baby. I was now 16 and pregnant, so I told him that and that I wasn't looking for a relationship because of my situation. He said he understood and that we could just be friends. But now every time we hung out, he would try and pull a move on me. But it wasn't anything huge like kissing me or trying to have sex with me. He would just always tell me how beautiful I was and how my ex was an idiot for not trying to be with me, or try and hold my hand or put his arm around me. I told him every time he did this to knock it off and that I wasn't comfortable with what he was doing. He would stop and he wouldn't do anything again for a few days. Things were going good and Randy was keeping his hands and flirts to himself. That is until one day we were hanging out at my house on a rainy day. We were sitting on my bed watching YouTube videos when I started having stomach pains, so I decided to lay down. We continued with me laying on my back and him sitting next to me for about 20 minutes, but then the pain got worse, so I decided to roll over and pull up my knees, and then I felt him put his arm around me and put his body against mine, basically spooning me. I sat up real fast and asked him what the heck he was doing, and he just kinda stared at me for a minute and then tried to kiss me. I completely freaked out and pushed him off my bed because I have PTSD and it makes me freak the heck out when people touch me, and he knew this very well. So I started flipping out on him a little bit and made him leave. After he left, I locked all the doors and told him I didn't want to see him anymore and then blocked him on everything. Things were going good for a while. My ex blocked me when I told him I was pregnant because he thought I was lying and trying to trap him, even though I broke up with him and had several positive pregnancy tests. Once I got my first ultrasound, I had a mutual friend of ours send a picture of it to him, and it had my name on it and everything, as well as how old the baby was. He unblocked me and told me that he believed I was pregnant now, and was going to be helping out with what he could, coming to appointments with me and looking for a job and all that. He wanted to get back together, but I refused, saying I only wanted him as the father of my baby. He would be nothing more. The point in all this is we became good friends again, and I ended up telling him what Randy did to me, and he didn't take it very well. He immediately messaged him and they set up a fight for the next day in the school auditorium. I know, stupid, right? They both obviously got suspended and I found out that my ex is a horrible fighter. A few days after the fight, I had a miscarriage. Obviously, I was out of school now for a couple of weeks. Word got around pretty quickly because now my ex was once again telling everyone that I wasn't actually pregnant and I was lying to try and trap him, even though he had come to appointments where I had ultrasounds and had a baby bump, as I was 3.5 months along, and I'm a very petite girl. So everyone in my school started to hate me. I started getting messages of people bullying me and telling me how awful I am. So things were not going well for me. So Randy beat the crap out of my ex for this. Like, I'm talking put him in the freaking hospital. I was scared. I didn't know why he did that. So one night I woke up to the sound of someone in my room, so I turned my light on, and there's Randy sitting in the chair in my room. I was home alone, so I was freaking terrified. I asked him what the heck he was doing in my house and how he got in. He told me he came in through the back door because apparently it's easy to pick the lock on the bottom door, and the top door doesn't have a lock, and my parents didn't think it was necessary to put one on there. Now, just to clarify, I'm on the second floor, and we have a back porch with a door that leads to some stairs that leads to another door into the house. So anyway, I started to freak out and I told him he had to leave. I started screaming at him for all of the crap he had been causing me. I started crying and he rushed over to me to try and hold me. I shoved him away, but he got angry and pulled out a knife. Now I was really scared. He started screaming at me about how he just wanted to love me and be there for me, and how I just kept hurting him and he didn't deserve that. You know, truly delusional, obsessed person talk. So I start trying to talk to him and I get him to calm down. He's listening and I start slowly turning it around so I'm near the door and he's not. He then begins to realize this and then grabs me and tells me, "You're not going anywhere. Don't even try it." Now he's really angry and he's telling me about how now he really sees that I don't see how good he is for me, and that just won't do, and that if he can't have me, no one can. He starts to freak out and doing a lot of crazy mumbling to himself. And in his mini freak out, he turns away from me, and I grab something and just start beating him with it. But he's not going down. He's just taking the hits like nothing is happening and just lunges at me with the knife. I managed to dodge him, but he still got me. I now had a nice slice on my side. That caught me off guard, so while I was distracted, he got up and just kicked me in the back so freaking hard I flew a few feet. That hurt so bad and knocked the wind out of me. I was pretty much just laying there, thinking I was gonna die. Now he's walking all slow towards me, saying I shouldn't have done that, and now I'm gonna pay. And in that moment, a cop kicks the freaking door in and tackles him, and another one comes in and swoops me out and carries me off into the street, while like 6 more huge cops run to my room. I was then taken to the hospital and treated for my wounds. I found out later that he was on MDMA, and it took 7 guys and being tased 4 times to take him down. Thanks to my neighbor though for hearing my distress and calling the cops. If only they had gotten there sooner and not stood at the downstairs front door freaking knocking waiting for me to answer. The cops in my area are pretty stupid. At the time he was only 15, so he didn't go to jail. He got 5 years probation and 6 months community service. His family moved away after that and I haven't seen him since. Thank God. I've recovered nicely as the most damage that was done was I had a huge nasty black and blue bruise that covered most of my back for a couple of months, and the cut. But it wasn't too deep and he didn't kick me hard enough to do any severe damage. So I'm doing okay now, but it was still a traumatizing experience. So creepy obsessed guy, please let's never meet again because you actually scared the freaking crap out of me. Number 4. This happened to me around 2005 when I was around 14 to 15 years old. I had a paper round and part of the round included a small path by the side of the local high school. It wasn't very well used or lit, but it cut at least 20 minutes off my route. Not a problem during the summer, but in autumn/winter it's going dark by 4 p.m. So I used to just run up there as quickly as I could to get back onto the main road where it's more well lit. I did this for around a year without incident, so I never really felt bothered by this, until one day I see this guy by the path's entrance. He was tall, skinny, bald, and his eyes were quite sunken. He gave me the creeps, but he never said anything to me, so I didn't think much of it. I ran up to the path to the main road and carried on with my route as usual. A few days later, I saw him again coming out of a house that is on the same street as the path entrance, so again, I didn't really think much of it and just carried on. After that, I used to see him all the time sulking around. Whatever time I went out to do my route, he was there, morning and night. It really bothered me, but I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want them to think I was over-exaggerating. The final straw was one day he started following me, so I started to run, and so did he. Luckily, I managed to knock on someone's door who saw how distraught I was, who let me in to calm down. I phoned my dad, who came to pick me up, and we drove down the road that he lived on. I pointed his house out, so my dad went and knocked on his door and asked what kind of game he thought he was playing. He answered the door, saw my dad, and then bolted. My dad, to those who don't know him very well, would see him as very intimidating because he's tall, well-built, tattoos, bald head, and a beard. My dad chased after him up the pathway where he liked to stalk me, And when he came back a few minutes later, he got back in the car. He then told me that the guy would never bother me ever again. I don't know what happened when my dad caught up to him, but thanks to my dad, I never had to cross paths with that creep ever again. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a lot shorter than my usual videos, but I hope you still enjoyed it, and I promise my next ones will be longer like usual. So I hope you still liked it despite the shorter length. And as always, if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to send it to me in an email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. And before we bring this video to a close, I'd like to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Celeste S, Ellie S, Heather B, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jess, Jonathan C, Jonas B, Carrie F, Lori J, Lindsay S, Matthew B, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank you all so much for supporting me on Patreon. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron and get a shout out, be sure to head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful day. And remember to always stay on.